everybody. It's your girl Keisha Ann, the MFN editor, and this is the Fuzzy Cow Podcast, Episode 2, Season 2, presented to you by Octant. And we're really, really excited because we actually have someone from the Octant team here, which, these are very busy people, very, very impactful people in the ecosystem. So they're always running around and doing something. So Mashal Waqar, is that how you say your last name? How do you say your last name?
Waqar.
Waqar, yes. Mashal Waqar here in the building. She is the head of marketing for Octant. Mashal, say hi.
Hi, everyone. Michelle, I had marketing at Octant. And yeah, really, really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it is. It's great to have you. I think that we're going to have some really great conversations. And yeah, it was only right, as we've kind of like just told everybody in social media land, right? For this season, Octant and the Fuzzy Cow podcast are in a collaboration and a partnership. The Fuzzy Cow was blessed to receive a grant from the Octant for their community fund part 2. And we just want to keep the good, keep paying it forward and keep the good stuff rolling, really. They have like a really, really dope, vibrant ecosystem that we're kind of like exploring on our website and also producing some other content around called Echoes. So if you want to learn more about Octant, please feel free. There are plenty of opportunities and plenty of resources for you to do so. But we're just going to get into it. So, last season, how we kind of did it, we have to start off with the news, right? Because the Fuzzy Cow is crypto news you can trust, and there's always something going on. This first story is definitely just going to be coming to us again from no other place than Capitol Hill with the SEC always at work, this time seeming to kind of try to be like undoing a lot of the wrongs that they feel like the Biden administration did. This time it'll be in the form of dropping the case against XRP, also known as Ripple for those that know. XRP is the ticker of their coin. But, that's really exciting. I mean, I think a lot of people have been waiting on that. It's been 4 years. Yeah, it's been.
I think this is going to be a really, really big one. I mean, we've been seeing a bunch of, I'd say like lawsuits being dropped. It's been really, really good for the crypto industry as a whole. I was surprised by how much adoption Ripple has. And just like a random side note, right? Like, so my uncle in Houston, who I did not expect to have a conversation about crypto, but of course, if you ask, where do you work? The conversation inevitably comes up of like, what do I put money in? But he was like, yeah, I've been bullish on Ripple. Like I'm just been having like holding Ripple for years and years. And I was like, interesting. But I was having conversations with other friends and they're talking about how Ripple has such strong adoption in Philippines specifically and like parts of Southeast Asia. So I was like, very interesting. And Hawaii, interestingly enough, too. So
well, in BRICS, right? They are the official currency of BRICS, which is that's South Africa, that's India, that's Russia, and that's Brazil. I mean, those are very huge economic players. And them even doing that is like kind of letting you know where the cards are going to fall in terms of global superpowers coming up. And so, for me, I think the thing that I kind of think about is last season we kind of spoke about, and kind of just in general with the platform, right? We're an educational platform. So a lot of our audience and a lot of our outreach is for introducing people kind of to, blockchain as a whole and like what's available and specifically the use of cryptocurrency. But I think that people kind of know for themselves. And I think like what we focused on a lot was how people didn't know about like different tokens or they didn't know how to apply these principles and they didn't really feel comfortable or safe. And also the lack of necessity that they had to like learn this information on their own because of how secure and stable everything feels in the United States. I think that, the trauma of a second Trump presidency, you know what I mean, has taken a lot of just that general security away. I think that whatever discomfort people felt like they were feeling in the Biden era definitely led to a lot of XRP adoption. And I think just my underlying point is that we have been waiting for an impetus, right, and a catalyst to get people to care on their own. Because in this country, that's what it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be convenient, and people are going to have to feel like it was their idea to come to it, right? They don't want to feel coerced. They don't want to feel like, they've been hogtied and, thrown in with anything, right? And so the fact that XRP has, without marketing, without any of the bells and whistles of, the industry, right? Really kind of just straight laced, directly got to the root of the people. They even have like a vibrant, bustling Instagram page that has like, real
So,
engagement.
so that's what it is, right? I think they have been marketing and all of that, but just not to us. I'd say like, they know their market, they know their audience, and they've done a really good job with it, even with partners such as Binance and other exchanges where you constantly see. So I'm more familiar with a lot of the Middle Eastern ones, right, that I have used in the past. And like you'd constantly see XRP and just like Ripple constantly in terms of like updates and even in terms of like notifications and whatnot, and just like concentrated marketing efforts too. So I think like that's probably part of it where it's like not for the crypto crowd probably.
Yeah, and one of these, and that's what I love about it. I mean, again, we talk a lot, and of course, you being a marketing professional, like crypto's biggest Achilles heels that we keep talking to ourselves, and that we put up a partition by vocabulary, right, and just by culture between us and everybody else. That calling people normies, you know what I mean, that having conferences and
Yes.
accessible places,
Yeah.
because that's damn near a slur at this point, you know what I mean, that calling people, putting people in inaccessible places, it's like it's just it's not a good vibe, right? And the world is so vibey right now, and it's just like, yeah, people don't like that vibe. So the fact that an institution, something so institutional, can come and like be a better vibe than a bunch of startups is definitely still keeping it moving on the institutional piece. Bank of America just recently came out and said that if regulators would allow their down to create a stable coin and get that going as a financial product for their clients. Yeah, I'm gonna just be honest. Don't love that. I don't love that because I don't love Bank of America. And I lived in Atlanta for a long time. So for anybody that might be watching this and know why that's culturally like, yeah, like y'all know, like Bank of America is not it. And please don't come and get me. But I'm just saying, like, I think that everybody knows that's had a Bank of America account. And so for me, this is kind of like, and it's also interesting too because Trump's Treasury pick came out as we reported, I think 2 shows ago, and said that there will be no stable coin on the U.S.'s watch. And he was argued down and argued back ferociously with it about, the use cases for it and the utility of it and how other countries like China, and whatnot have had much social success and economic success with that.
Yeah, I think I did agree with him. I thought that was solid. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
we should have CB.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of use cases from a grassroots level, right? Even when we talk about things like a UBI, universal basic income and stuff, like a stable coin could be tied to all of those things very easily. You know what I mean? And provide that very, especially from like a reserve, right? Or some type of centralized liquidity pool. But my main thing with these types of things continues to be the people that get in on them in this country, right? Like crypto is such a different conversation in every nation of the world. And that is something that Americans, I think, take for granted or also just don't have awareness of, right? Because we only get the Google results that we get and we only hear the news that we hear. You really have to be in a privileged position, right? To go outside and be like, no, but the world loves this though. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, everybody stuff is cool. And it's discouraging because it's kind of like with the Trump coin, right? It's like the people that become the beacons of this and the people that get this information and get these concepts in front of everybody else are not the best entities. I wouldn't like if Chase was talking about a stable coin either, because at its core, y'all don't even need to be here. Like nobody was ever talking to y'all and we're actually trying to get away from you. So the fact that you're even talking to us is like really super crazy and you should not be sitting here. But since you are, also I think the last thing I'll say on that is I thought we all agreed that USDC was kind of a stable coin for the country. I mean, I thought we all just kind of like felt like that's what was going on. So, yes.
That's sort of what I thought too. I was like, I mean, it just makes sense for USDC to be the default, but I mean, hey, what do I know?
Yeah, like right. Yeah, we're just girls. Last story for the ticker is actually, so this one might be a little bit more esoteric, but we're glad to bring you inside of our world. So last week, a company called Solana, which produces the Sol coin on their blockchain, pretty big player in the ecosystem, been around and a part of major conversations, at least since about 2021. They've been around longer than that, but they've really started to proliferate, our sector and really take up space since the last 3-4 years. And, the just to paint the context for Solana, in 2020, 2021, 2017, 19, 18, whatever, very much more of an academic collective, of people, kind of, more of I would say like economic research type of foundation, right, for tokenomics on chain. That was kind of like the seriousness with which they presented themselves and like the, legitimacy I felt like that they wanted to have, for those that are more familiar, again, an entity like a Stellar Network or one of those entities that are kind of, again, like even like we just spoke about, kind of like more in the community, doing more things as we know Ethereum to be, kind of sort of like that. And then they went away, and then they came back, and well, when they came back, it was just different. It just hit different. And that's really, a lot
If
of
you know, if you know a lot of meme coins, I mean, Solana is to credit for that. Pump.fun, one of their biggest,
yes.
I'd say, success stories, but also just like the really, really strong, concentrated effort at adoption and building a very strong ecosystem.
Yes. And I think for them, truly just being a marketing person, and you tell me how you feel about this, but it's definitely one of those things where that people are sitting in their siloed conversations, right, within their community corporate culture, right, and they're just telling each other, good job, good idea, back and forth, back and forth. Concept of the ad for Solana was basically essentially a young white male, will say between like 27 and 37, sitting on his shrink's couch. And there are definitely some visual cues. Like I can go into a whole media literacy thing about this right now, but for all that haven't seen it, and maybe we'll play like a little clip of it in a picture in the box here. But like, and especially for me and my community, and I'm sure Mashal for you and yours, right? For people of color watching this, right? There are all types of like visual cues that already kind of make you uncomfortable. But when they choose to start doubling down on it in his speech, right? And so him in his character, he just starts talking about like basically, I'm just trying to do something. I'm trying to do something right now. I'm trying to do something real. I'm trying to do something that matters. And everybody just wants to talk about basically stuff that doesn't, and then they start bringing up the gender conversation, like why are genders matter, and then which is something that I think most of the industry has gravitated towards. Like they really like latched on to him saying that about the gender thing, and then you know what I mean, got really upset about that, and that's valid. But I think he said so much more, so that was also equally disturbing. The thing that I found most disturbing was when he got into the point. Well, hey, let me just also say, I did not like the presentation of the shrink. I felt like again that was condescending. It was demeaning. Every time the character would say something, she would say something that was faux woke, right? And so she would say like, he would say like, I got in trouble once because 2 plus 2, I said 2 plus 2 equals 4. And she said, well, have you ever considered that, maybe it doesn't equal 4 because there are spaces in between the twos and maybe those can be counted, right? And it's like supposed to be like a riff on her, but it's like she's actually the type of thinker, you know what I mean, that the industry should be like, you should be thinking outside the box. So then he follows up with, he stands up and he's like, and I guess it's meant to look like a normal Rockwell painting at this point, because he stands up and he's like yelling into the sky. And he's like, I want to be innovation. I want to be inventive again. And to me, in my ears, I hear whining, right? What I see, what I feel, and what I hear is a white man whining that he wants to be innovative again. He wants people to look at him, you know what I mean, and give him the credit. Why doesn't anybody care about me anymore? Like, and the fact that him acted like that, you know what I mean, and that there was no like in all of the like. To me, I felt like everything that they portrayed in that was their grand reveal of like their personification of like who they feel like Solana is.
It was a caricature. It was problematic on so many fronts. It was like, I think one is a reflection of where we're at with things politically, socially, what people feel comfortable saying, what they feel comfortable. Like when I think about who sat in this meeting to discuss this and thought this is great, one part of me thinks everyone knew this is going to be engagement bait and this is going to get called out and people are going to be so upset. And if that was your point, well done. You did it. At what cost though?
At what
Because
cost?
now you've alienated a lot of people who have built your chain, your community, who have been part of this space for years, right? That's one part of it. You've alienated a lot more people who even if like slightly like could resonate but don't anymore. And like I think there was just like a lot of things that were wrong. But the other part of it is like they thought, oh, because it's acceptable, like, and that's the other rationale, right? And I'm just constantly like, I wasn't part of that room. I'm glad I wasn't.
Yeah.
If I was, it would not have come out. Um, and I think this is why you probably need an image specialist a lot of times once you've gone past a certain point.
And a sensitivity reader. Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
100%. But I think that aside, like, I think the other part is like they were like, "Yo, this is the climate. We can say this. It's okay, and people will celebrate it." So I don't know which one of the two. And when it did come out, a lot of people did speak out in support of it.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of this, like, yeah, a lot of like the kind of like messaging that you're seeing, right, which is like very nationalistic in ways too, and I
Yes.
think in ways that like you could celebrate culture in a lot of wins. Yeah, I don't. I think it's an interesting time. But as a marketer, I like looked at it every type of way. I was, of course, very upset for so many levels. One tweet really captured part of the sentiment, which was, I think someone said, "This video looks like after this he's going to go become a shooter."
Oh, yeah, Winnie, she was like, yeah, the founder of Chip Social, and she was like, yeah, the vibes were so bad. I thought that he was going to be a shooter at the
Yeah, I
end.
think
No,
this is Winnie who tweeted that, but I got
yeah,
that vibe too. Like with that
yes.
anger that he was like, "You're fired," and I was like, "Okay, cool."
Yeah, I'm going to maybe at the end here, I'll include it, or again, we may have played it in the bottom now, but you'll get to see it full screen. But please, I do want everybody for their own, to look at the commercial, share with us your thoughts about it. Tell us how that made you feel. That was the ticker. Thanks, Mashal, for being accompanying me on that. I really appreciate that. And so for this next segment, you guys know what we like to do, which is making it make sense. I am going to go with first of all, let me just say blockchain is full of terms and vocabulary that can be overwhelming, really convoluted, confusing. I'm here to help with that. And so in this one, we're going to talk about smart contracts, what they are, what they mean, and how they work.
Smart contracts are agreements created to be honored and interpreted by blockchain technology. These contracts are self-executing programs that contain viable information about which actions must be performed in order for a transaction to happen on-chain. Before the data can be stored, a developer must first engineer the contract and decide which parameters will be present in said contract. Though they can have several uses, smart contracts are mainly associated with cryptocurrency and most developed on the Ethereum blockchain. The smart contracts developed in the ETH ecosystem are considered foundational to the creation and development of NFTs in DeFi platforms and Web3. Smart contracts boast a ton of benefits, including, but not limited to, reducing the need for third parties, reducing the potential for fraud, and allowing for a clear and publicly visible record of transactions that are transparent and irreversible. If you want to work with smart contracts, consider becoming a smart contract writer or a smart contract auditor. Smart contract writers are responsible for programming the details of the agreements represented by smart contracts. They earn between $80,000 and $300,000 USD annually. Smart contract auditors are responsible for reviewing the code programmed by the smart contract developers for quality and consistency, as well as security. They also earn between $80,000 and $200,000 USD annually.
So everybody, we are back with our guest, our lady of the hour, or the 30 minutes anyway, Mashal. She is head of marketing for Octant, our partner in season 2. and just a really great person. She has a really, really, a wealth of really dope experiences that I think make her a valuable asset, of course, to any team and definitely to all of the grantees that she has been mentoring and helping us on our journey as we've kind of been like getting our deliverables in and whatnot. But I just wanted to take time and talk to her, learn a little bit more about her, and also too like how she feels like her work with Octant kind of plays into her bigger picture and into the grand scheme of blockchain. So on that note, Mashal, tell me a little bit about your journey. Like, where are you from? What's your background of the 30 minutes anyway?
Yeah, of course. So, so I'm Pakistani. I was born and raised in the Gulf, and I, yeah, I would say just like a third culture kid as a whole, right? So I think the interesting thing if you live in the Gulf is you're so global in your perspectives, just because of everyone you interact with that you grow up around and media consumption. And I think that was interesting. So I've got a tech background. I majored in cybersecurity. Had nothing to do with media. Ended up in it with a media entrepreneur for a good few years, and was quite deep into audience building, community building, and a lot of the yeah, I'd say like the understanding people side of things. And so my first intro to crypto was Bitcoin through Tumblr. I was really big on Tumblr back in the golden days of Tumblr. And I remember it was like a cool inside joke. There was you always spoke about Bitcoin. It was one of those things when you were part of fandoms. It would always creep up. And so that's how I first got to know about it. And then when I was studying, we would host Bitcoin workshops at college campuses. And so that was like my starting point.
What year
And
was that?
so found out about Tumblr in 2014.
Okay.
Sorry, Bitcoin in 2014, and then the workshops we would give in 2015 and 2016.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then I kind of like would lightly put money into Bitcoin and Ethereum, like as much as I could afford at that point. I wasn't making a lot of money at all, so it was just here and there and whatever. And then suddenly, when the markets went up the first time, I was like, "Wait, what? I can now pay rent with this money? Like that's crazy." So that was my intro into it. Then I lost touch, but I was very online because if you're in, I've always been chronically online. But started looking at NFTs, and I thought like monkey JPEGs being sold for like millions. That sounds weird. Like, why would Visa put all this money into? And I think this is when they had bought CryptoPunks.
Okay.
So I remember that first headline thinking like, haha, this is so funny. And I had gotten past the point being a startup mentor and a bunch of, being super involved in the startup ecosystem. Anytime someone would use the word blockchain, it felt like a buzzword for like trying to insert it into things that didn't make sense.
Right.
So I would almost laugh at the idea. But I remember when NFT started booming, like everybody, I was interested and I thought, let me try to figure like I want to get involved. I want to learn more about it. And then I had a really close friend at that time who was like, you should definitely put like here's a starting point. So my first NFTs were crypto covenants. And through that I started getting into NFTs, and I consider those investments for education, not actual investments at this point, because none of them were. I didn't sell when I should have sold because I always thought they'd go higher, and of course they didn't. At one point after the FTX crash, and slowly started getting into the concept of DAOs, and that was really interesting to me because decentralized autonomous organizations, right? Typically, you have like a top-down structure in organizations. DAOs were decentralized, and it was people collectively making decisions. And I was kind of wowed, as were a lot of people at that time, because you could choose your own role. You could be part of a few different DAOs, you could contribute, and you could get compensated for it.
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting. Now, I did realize though that you needed to build a reputation. If you were transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3, it's like there's a whole like hierarchy and social structures that you understand as you get deeper into the space, right? But to build a reputation, you needed a little bit more of like nativeness and experience. So at first I was just vibing, thinking like I had my consultancy with Web 2 clients and, giving audience building and media boot camps and whatnot and helping clients with their audiences. But there was something really interesting about DAO. So I started going deeper and deeper, joined Bankless DAO, Gitcoin, Seed Club, Protein, and Radar, and did a few different projects with each of them.
Like, how did you get bit by the public goods bug?
The way I started getting into the public goods side was through Gitcoin's quadratic funding rounds. So they would do a lot of funding rounds, And I started doing case studies for them on these rounds, learning more about what was working. Before that, I had done a token report model that was for internal use for Seed Club. But of course, at that time, the US legislation was scary. And so a lot of this wasn't publicized, and people were getting really iffy about tokens at that point in the US, especially if they were based. And so that never publicly made it. But getting into Gitcoin, doing the case studies. And I have had a research background, having co-authored a paper in entrepreneurship and challenges and whatnot. So I got connected to a researcher, Eugene, who heads MetaGov, which is a pretty great institution. They do a lot of unbiased, like reports and some really, really impactful work in this industry. And so he was curious about grants programs, and State of Web 3 grants report is like this. So that's one of the reports that I co-authored, and we came together because we had a lot of questions about grants programs in this industry. If like there's billions of dollars that have gone into it, but with no clarity and transparency a lot of times. So we thought, why don't we do the first report that uncovers it all? So we started with that, got to speak to almost every grants operator we did 13 in the first version, and these were some programs. And that really led to me going deeper and deeper into the public good side of things, because understanding how things worked and whatnot, really going deeper into the research side of things and still doing a lot of the DAOing that I was doing led me to Octant. So it was very, very, very random too, because I had no idea what Octant was. My familiarity with public goods was through Giveth and Gitcoin and a lot of like the more, public side of things that I had personally been a part of and had contributed to. But this was a project. And when I realized the kind of impact that they were having and the kind of like sustainable mechanism they had, I was blown away. And I thought, how do more people not know about this? This is such a shame. And this is at an inflection point in my career where I thought, okay, I need to choose a path. I can go all in. And I had sort of gone all in when I was DAOing and doing all these projects. But I think that was really the point where I thought, I think this is meaningful, and let's see how it goes. And so a couple months of working with the team, I realized I loved the work that we were doing. And I felt like there was so much potential here, because every single industry I've been a part of, and, especially being on the side where you're constantly looking for funding and you struggle for whatever reasons and challenges, right? There are opportunities, and we need to get these opportunities to newer communities and people where you don't always understand and have access to. And I think that became like a central point of like, I can actually do a lot of good. We can do a lot of good with our roles even in the project. And it was such a solid team of people. And I enjoyed my experience so much. I was like, you know what, this is what I'm going to focus on.
Kind of things, or have you encountered any like oppositions, reluctances when trying to tell people, like, did y'all know that there's another way to get real money to do the things you're trying to do?
I think Web 2, for Web 2 folks, it's really like, how is this real and why do you do it? And we've had a strong commitment to open source and growing Ethereum, but I would say, yeah, for a lot of folks, they just don't understand how to like, you need to be able to be flexible enough to understand like, how do you get funds, and then how do you ensure sustainability? And I think that's what makes a really good founder or builder, is like, you can adapt and you can work within the different worlds that you're in to be able to sustain yourself. Yeah, there usually is, but I think people who are in the space like sort of understand and are able to benefit from it. But I still think we have a long way to go in terms of getting to a lot more people. So far, I think we've done a really good job with technical builders too. I think we need to start growing to past just technical builders as well, I would say. Because again, even the good ones are like few and in between in ways, and like everyone's trying to like poach all the good builders, right? That's what every single layer 2 is trying to do. That's what every single, I'd see some like even layer 1 is trying to do. And so when you have like a smaller pool, you need to expand out. And I think that's something I hope we get to do a lot more. But yeah, absolutely. There are challenges where people don't understand or question, why would you make something open source? Like, I think one of the biggest misconceptions we had this in even Accelerator was, how can we be open source and sustainable? How do we make money off of this? And I think there are some really good use cases. People just need to put more effort in understanding what's possible. I think there's a lot of ways, like, I'd say like Red Hat is one example, right? Like open source, but still being able to benefit from charging on the service side of things. And I think there's ways that you can come up with the monetization. You need to actively put concentrated efforts into building something people will pay for. Yeah. I think that's the other thing people have delusions about, where they think like 20 people is enough to like they'll have 20 people using their project or, you know, using whatever they've built or benefiting from it, and then expect to get hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like that is not the space we're in anymore. You need to show results, where we've gone to the stage where you have to show traction. And I think more projects need to start thinking about that.
Yeah, because it's time for the proof of work to be in the pudding. That these things actually exist in new work. And you're right, 20 people is not product market fit, unfortunately. At least not when you're asking for like millions, right? I think for me, the narrative about public goods, or the narrative that I kind of relate to, is this idea that it's crowdfunded, but it's also kind of like, in a way, it's not corporately backed, because these, companies like Octant, they don't really see themselves as companies. They see themselves as communities and organizations, right? But there is like that type of like security, right? It's not just like a GoFundMe, right? Where you're kind of just the whim of whoever wants to help. When people start to understand staking, right, and the idea of that being a mechanism that helps you accrue essentially interest, and you can kind of get, more, as you give more. Like, I think people can start to understand kind of like the dynamics and the mechanisms behind how it's successful and why you would keep doing it. And then also why you would be incentivized to pay that forward for the next person. Because you do continue to benefit as you are benevolent, right? And you don't really see that a lot in the world in general. But I do think that, if people could understand that this is just one of the blessings of blockchain technology, that it allows us to thrive somewhere in this space between, again, being supported by the communal, right? But then also having like, just that legitimacy of, an organization and entity, something bigger than ourselves, is backing this financially, So everybody, that was the Fuzzy Cow, episode 2, season 2. Thank you so much, Mashal. Do you want to say bye to the
Thank you for
audience?
having me. This is so great. Love this conversation, and thank you for doing what you do. I love the show, and I'm so glad that you're part of the Octant ecosystem.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. We'll put all the information that she shared, as well as how to get in contact with her, if you have any other questions about V2 or Octant, and we'll see you soon.